and it's served over whiter brown rice, and it's just fantastic. That and a salad, and then brownies or chocolate cake for dessert with some red wine all in there. It's awesome.
So you're joining WCL right now, Dine-In, and we have Gina Riley with us today. And before we get started, while we're waiting for everyone to join our room, we're chatting with her about one of her favorite recipes. And I think it's only appropriate, Gina, to ask, and what is the right wine for serving with cherries and chicken?
Well, the one listed here on the actual recipe card from this winery is a Cabernet Franc. I would say, Zinfandel, Cabernet. You could drink a nice Pinot with it, Pinot Noir. So really, any wine is probably going to be fine. Even a sweet wine would go with it because you've got the sweet.
So I got to tell you guys, from knowing Gina just a little bit, I know that she is an aficionado with both food and libations to go with food. So I would absolutely trust her recipes and trust her recommendations. And we are so glad to have you with us today, Gina. We've got a big crowd joining us today. And so I think we should go ahead and think about getting started here. I want to welcome everybody to WCL's Dine-In. This is obviously something we started since these crazy times have started, but we've decided it's really kind of a nice thing to be able to unpack your lunch, sit down and eat your lunch with some entertainment or interesting-tainment in front of you. And so that's the whole idea of Dine-In. You're eating your lunch, we're talking, we're sharing great recipes that maybe you can take for later in the day. For dinner. So we're going to be talking with Gina today, and I'm really excited to introduce Gina because I've had the opportunity to work with her on some WCL programs that we're developing for a later launch date. She's been a specialist that we've brought in, a content specialist to work on some of these things. Gina has her she has her undergrad in organizational communication, and then her master's degree in whole systems and organizational design. But she's taken that to a really interesting place. She is now kind of an executive career coach along with I'm going to call it, I guess she is a search expert. And so she works with organizations who are looking for CEOs, C-suite people, and tries to help them find exactly the right people to bring into their organization. So she has incredible skills in terms of networking, building your resume, thinking about how to present your story. She's really a storyteller that helps people put together the best story to articulate their experiences. Is that kind of right, Gina?
I think you nailed it.
Okay. Well, we'll have her articulate her career story because she'll probably be able to do a better job at that. But I also want to mention that Gina was a keynote speaker at the 2019 Career Thought Leaders Conference and Symposium. So she is quite known in the area of this. You can find her really actively on LinkedIn. And at the end, we'll kind of connect you with that because she does drop a lot of great tips and knowledge on a regular basis. So with that, I'd like to introduce Gina.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here with everyone, and enjoy your lunch. Throw questions into the chat. And we'd love to hear from you as we kind of move along. And definitely enjoy the cherries and chicken because it's awesome. Okay, I am hitting my button to advance this. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a question in the chat box. Would you put in there what you find the most daunting about networking? Some people don't have a problem at all with networking. It's like breathing. It's not a big deal. But for other people, it can be really something to have to get over some mental hurdles to reach out and especially connect with people that you don't know. So we're just curious about the things that you're finding really daunting. We're going to circle back and then start reading some of those. So the topic today is the 3 habits to give your career velocity. And I wrote an article about 2 years ago on this topic. And so we're going to be going through those 3 steps that I talk about, and it's posted on LinkedIn if you want to read the full article. What do I mean by career velocity? I like to think of velocity as having career agility, having flexibility, being able to keep your career moving in a direction where you feel like you're learning and you're growing and you're developing. And if you hit a certain speed bump in the road, like we've got going on with COVID, do you have the ability to be a career switcher, a career changer, move into a different role? Some people are experiencing job loss. So what I mean by velocity is really that flexibility. And what I want people to be thinking about is adopting regular, long-term habits for their networking. So networking habits. And I just want you to be able to have that career movement when you want to and when you need to.
So, Gina, we have a lot of responses coming in.
Oh my goodness.
And yes, Kate, join in because you're probably reading faster than I. But a lot of people are talking about working up, leveling up when they're networking to people who have a strong reputation in CV, breaking the ice, knowing how to launch those conversations. Kate, what else have you seen?
All of those, some people, the first step, how to ask people for their time. And then I didn't catch the name of this person, but I think this is resonant for probably many people. If you work in a male dominated industry or company, how are you, what are your small talk? What are your topics to kind of create that? That might be an interesting one for you to spend a little time on.
Ooh, that one's great. Yeah, I hadn't quite thought of that one before. I don't think I've been asked that one in that way. I can talk about my own experiences. I spent 10 years inside of Intel, and I worked with a lot of females, particularly in staffing. But there were obviously a lot of men, a lot of engineers. And so, one of the ways that I networked was actually learning how to play golf and actually hitting the golf course and having something to talk about when I was in meetings and people would come back in from their weekend and talk about golfing during the beautiful weather, and I would actually have something to contribute. So that's just one small way, but there's other topics without having to take up golf. But I did find connecting through sports and having conversations, even in a very lightweight way, was a way to break the ice, because it's really about breaking the ice so people feel like they get to know you, and then you can start talking about professional things.
And that's great, Gina. I think that was another question that came up a lot, is just how to make that first step or outreach that a lot of folks wanted to get your insight on.
Absolutely. What I've kind of developed for myself is this regular habit of reaching out to people as soon as I see something that's really, really interesting to me. It's usually on the LinkedIn platform, but not exclusively. I might be reading an article in Inc. magazine or Forbes, or it might be a professor recently from Harvard who is an expert in a specific type of leadership. As soon as I'm reading something or investigating something, I hop onto LinkedIn. I go in and I make a personalized connection request, and I'll say, "Hey, Marty, I just read this article about, this kind of leadership, and I really wanted to connect with you and follow your work." So you don't get very many characters when you make that first personalized connection request. So you have to get really good at being economical. But I would say by and large, most of the time people will connect back with me and engage in a dialogue. If someone's a really, really big influencer and they have too many people following them or too many connections, that can be really challenging. Sometimes people will connect with me and sometimes they won't.
And I think maybe a good follow-up to that just came through in the chat is, after you make that first initial connection, how do you continue to follow up?
So it depends on the person and kind of what I might hope to get out of building a relationship. So let's kind of go for the big stuff. Let's say I connect with someone who is, I feel like, really a luminary in their field, or I may, I may want to tap into their resources at some point. I don't want to do that on the first part of the conversation. I just connect and then I say, thanks for connecting. Then I let it lie for a little while. And I follow what they do in their feed. What do they post? What do they talk about? And then I'll engage with meaningful dialogue on that. And then later, maybe weeks down the road, maybe it's even 6 months down the road, when something comes up when I really want their attention or I want to ask them a question, that's when I send them the in-mail message. Now I have access to them because I'm connected. And then that's how I break into the conversation. I've done it countless times, and it has led to all kinds of relationships, being quoted in, books, or being asked to do speaking engagements, or getting onto podcasts. It's very doable. You just have to make it a habit.
So Gina, when I look at this slide and think about what you're talking about today, it seems like you're going to talk with us about a different kind of networking maybe than we talked about earlier in the week. And earlier in the week, it was more one-on-one type of touches. But it looks like you're really thinking about how you set yourself up to be known, how you use maybe social media to expand your network and become really credible in the area of your expertise. Is that right, based on where we're going?
Yeah, it's both, and it's not exclusive. And I'm not a social media expert when it comes to Twitter or Facebook or any of that. Most of my time I spend on the professional platform of LinkedIn. There's over 500 million people on that platform, and so what I really am an advocate for is each person developing their own content expertise or thought leadership. So you can be early in your career, you can be late stages in your career. We all have a lane or a couple of lanes. In my case, I may be putting out content on executive search and hiring. I might be talking about interviewing skills because we teach and train on that within Talents Group to our client companies. Or it might be something in the lane of our coaching program. So I think building up your content expertise and feeling really, really good about those qualifications is the thing that will give you confidence when you enter conversations, and it will also just help you to get over the hurdle. Okay. And the idea in the long run is just to have this flexibility, like is on the slide. You want job mobility, you want to be known for something, and ultimately, when you want to be sought out by recruiters. When you're ready for a career change, it would be really wonderful if people were really calling you versus you having to feel like you're starting from scratch and knocking on doors.
We all want that.
I know. I've worked with senior execs who are asking me, well, why aren't people calling me? And I'm like, well, let's go take a look at your LinkedIn. Let's see what you're saying about yourself in your resume. Tell me your story. And when they can't tell a crisp story in the LinkedIn, it looks like it stepped out of 1992. It's not so good.
Okay.
All right. So we'll keep moving. So the first habit that I am a big advocate for is scheduling 15 minutes a day on your calendar. Make it a habit, a regular habit to reach out and connect with people on LinkedIn. You can connect other ways too. You might even want to start with who's, right here in your own phone Rolodex, but, and that might grease the skids too. Just connecting with people you haven't talked to in a while, finding out what they're doing professionally. What are the things that they're finding really interesting? What challenges are they facing? But spend that time reaching out. And once you start doing this, it does become a habit. I've read a lot on habit formation, and some of the experts will say that it takes about 60 days to form a habit. There may be some truth to that, but if you can at least make it a goal to shoot for that, doing that for 60 days, it will start to become more natural.
Gina, do you actually set a timer? Because, the problem is almost the opposite with me. I know if I dive into it, all of a sudden an hour is going to be gone and I'm going to be behind on something else. Yeah. So do you have a really religious 15-minute window, or what would you recommend for those of us diving in?
I don't, because my habit of networking is like breathing. As soon as I see something that's interesting, I am on LinkedIn connecting. So I do it naturally, and I probably spend more than 15 minutes on some days and less on other days. It just depends on what's coming my way. But for someone who hasn't developed that habit or feels nervous, I believe that you should track what you do, because if you don't track what you're doing, how do you know you've made any progress in building your relationships? Kind of goes back a little bit to Alice Tang's presentation a few days back. Keeping track and making notes on when you want to follow up with people. I'm a huge advocate for that. And you need to do it to build up that momentum. Fantastic. Or velocity. Okay, so the second thing is to educate and inform yourself. What I really think people should be doing is, whether or not you're on LinkedIn or if you're reading newspaper, virtual newspapers, read and maybe even journal or take notes on some of those new things that you're reading about. Keep track of it, because those themes and patterns about what's happening on your professional landscape are the things that you now can start reaching out and talking about with your LinkedIn community, with your followers, or to start that conversation with an influencer you would like to get to know. Or when I say influencer, that could mean someone really big, but maybe it's, the vice president of fill in the blank at some company that you'd really like to start building some rapport with on LinkedIn. That's how you get going. You need to have something to be talking about, though.
Gina, there's a really good question here in the chat that might be really relevant to this. Meredith wanted to know, how do you do this if you're not quite sure of what field or industry you want to be kind of targeting or focusing?
I think all the better to be doing this research, because that's going to inform your interests. Where you keep gravitating toward professionally, those are the topics that are going to light your fire. So that's the breadcrumb trail that's leading you down the path of, what you should be talking about with other professionals. So once you start doing that research and you build up the curiosity about that topic, that gives you a reason to reach out to people that you don't know and say, hey, I'm really trying to understand more about this technology, and I can see on LinkedIn that you appear to be an expert in this space. Do you have 15 minutes to jump on a call? I've got 3 questions that I want to ask you.
So follow your curiosity. That's great advice, I think, no matter where you are in your career.
Right. And the other thing too is, I talk about in the article that I wrote, being curious and generous. So your curiosity is all about those really awesome questions that you're going to be asking people that aren't obvious, that you don't just find on a company website, but also being just generous with your time and making sure that you're offering, hey, if there's anything that you can ever think of that I can do for you in exchange for spending time with me, please just let me know. I don't know what I can offer you, but I'm open. Okay. All right. So we thought we would pause and take a quick poll and see if people are actually using social media to advance your careers. And you could consider any of the platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram people are using. Mostly the professionals I deal with are on LinkedIn, but are you using social media to advance your career? Just hit yes or no. We'll give you a moment. And then are there any other questions that we want to be answering that might have come up in the chat?
Yes, we have a question from Erin. I think this is great. She said, can we talk about articles instead of sports as the icebreaker small talk part?
Love it. Yes. Thank you. That's perfect. Absolutely.
Don't talk about golf if you don't want to talk about golf. People will figure it out pretty quick.
Oh yeah, for sure. When I didn't know how to play golf, I would have sounded really, really silly. And for me, sometimes it's just the one little icebreaker, and then I get right off of whatever that topic is that I don't know anything about. But what I really find is, if you have some questions built up about things that you're curious about, and you're talking to someone that you're trying to build a relationship, that the best way to crack that nut open is to get them talking about their expertise. People love talking about their expertise.
Yeah, I think that there's so much more with understanding different industries and understanding how they compare to yours and what you can learn from other industries to apply to the business you're in. Harvard Business did some research. This was probably 5 or 6 years ago now, but it was on intuition, and they were trying to understand what intuition was. Do we really have a gut? And the net outcome of it was that people who displayed intuition had an uncanny sense to take things, a body of information, and apply it to something else. So don't feel like you're wasting your time if you're reading articles about motorcycles, because maybe the way they're bringing motorcycles to market applies to, there's a slice that applies to your business that allows you to be innovative. So I think, this practice, it can help you speak with people if you're doing one-on-one networking. It helps you reach out to people if you're working on LinkedIn. And it helps you build up a body of content to develop your intuition.
I love that. And what that relates to, what popped in my head when you were speaking, is women tend to be pretty good at systems thinking. Looking at the bigger picture and seeing how things kind of fit together. So if you have that natural inclination to, and you're using your intuition and you're pulling in different things from different fields of study, that's a really powerful conversation starter.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys, I'm going to share the results of the poll now. About 45 people voted, and we've got about a 60-40 split between yes and no. Mm-hmm. But before you respond to that, Gina, I'll also share, a couple people in the chat said, is there a meh answer or a I do it, but I don't feel like I do it effectively?
Yeah. Well, I think, are you asking me that, or?
That's probably 90%, right?
Yeah. I think some people are effective. I know people are effective at networking. I think that the hurdle is sometimes the word networking. It almost seems like a slimy, dirty word. And I don't see it that way at all. I see networking as relationship building. It's not passing out my business card. That's not networking. Networking is meeting someone and saying, tell me more about what you do and why you do what you do. So one thing that we do in our talents group interview and talent selection training is we'll go around the room and have people introduce a partner so we can kind of see who's in the room and, break the ice. And what we do is we'll ask them to share not their job title, but the purpose for their work. So instead of saying, I'm a staffing consultant, that's my job title. Instead, I'll say, I bring value to my organization by helping match really talented individuals with my client company. That's my purpose. So being able to talk with people about their purpose is a whole different shift, and people like talking about that. Mm-hmm. Most people, not all people.
Mm-hmm. One other question that came up earlier from Lisa that I think might be good timing now as well is, what if you're successful connecting with folks on LinkedIn and then they say, sure, send me some times and dates for us to meet. You do that and then you never hear back.
Ugh, the ghosting kind of. Oh gosh, that's a toughie. You know what? I'm going to ping pong this out to the crowd as well in the chat. If you out there have had some success, after maybe a few failure attempts in trying to get that audience with someone, would you throw that into the chat with how you've kind of overcome that? I'm going right off the top of my head because I haven't been asked that question before. One route could be, is there someone I can follow up with to help us schedule this? Because if you're trying to have someone who's, let's say, an executive who has an admin who manages their calendar, it would be much better if they introduce you to that admin in some way, and then you just get on the phone or you email with that person and then land on the calendar that way. It's probably because they're just busy.
We're seeing that in the chat as well. People are encouraging them to continue to follow up a week or so later. Shelby suggested give them a call if you do have contact information. So I think, everyone being busy, kind of just that frequency can help.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa, for that question.
Thanks so much. Okay. We'll go to the third habit to give your career velocity, and that is commit to one. So you're spending your 15 minutes reaching out, making connections, having rich dialogue with people. And when I say rich dialogue, I'm really talking about using LinkedIn as a way to nurture relationships. So when you see someone that has posted an article that they wrote, that's a commitment to write an article. It's even a commitment to share an article and write commentary about it. That took somebody time. So if you go and skim that article and you're like, wow, that was a great article, jump in the comments. The comments is what LinkedIn really values because it's engagement. So you jump in there and say, gosh, I read the article too, and number 3 really resonates with me, and I do that all the time. Thanks for the share. Something like that. So while you're making those connections, if you along the way could secure just one conversation with someone, if you do that, at the end of the year, you'll have 52 accumulated conversations, and that leads to the tracking. It's not a bad idea to track yourself for the first year until you kind of get into the habit, but you never know when you need to go back to that tracking spreadsheet when you're in career transition. Mm-hmm. That might be a place to start, when you're trying to reboot yourself. Mm-hmm. Any questions on that from the chat?
Well, I just want to say Gina kind of clarified for me the other day that just a like on LinkedIn is kind of third on the totem pole. A like doesn't really get you any recognition. It's the comment. Well, actually, wait.
Yeah.
You say it better.
So LinkedIn with their algorithm, which is a little bit mysterious. All the LinkedIn gurus that I follow, and this is what I've infused into our coaching program, is following this wisdom. 1, LinkedIn favors comments. They want engagement on the professional platform it's designed to do, to generate conversation. 2, a like. A like is okay. 3, lowest on the totem pole is resharing someone else's post, because it has to start all over in getting wings in LinkedIn to be perpetuated through the system. So what LinkedIn is going to do is value the post that starts to get real, legitimate, quality comments down below. And I'm not talking about being part of a pod. I've never been a part of a pod, but what I understand is it's groups of people that agree to, like and share and comment. And LinkedIn knows when that's taking place, and you don't get a lot of value out of that.
Mm-hmm. There's a few other questions that I think are really relevant. The first one is from Shannon, and she said, how do you balance making the connections and not appear to your employer that you're looking for additional opportunities?
Balancing like the connections as in starting to make a lot of connections and having your
if that might, and maybe Shannon, you can clarify if I'm not interpreting your question correctly, but maybe this is a nervous employer who sees you're being very active and then automatically assumes that you're looking for another job, and that could be potentially punitive.
Yeah. So if that is the case, I'll talk about, well, maybe the clarification is coming through. It can be a concern. It kind of just depends on your company and how much they're keeping tabs. A lot of companies are terrible about even managing their own LinkedIn profiles, the company page. I'm an advocate of companies standing behind their employees to strengthen individual brands as a way to promote the company, a way to promote what they're selling, a way to promote thought leadership. So if I was stuck with a little bit of fear around that, I think that what I would do is make sure I would go into all my privacy settings and, there wasn't anything, a red flag in the privacy settings, related to the employer. That would be one thing. But the other is put your toe in the water with making valuable comments. That doesn't mean, hey, I'm looking for a job. It's, hey, I'm engaging with professional conversation. And as far as like amping up your connections, your network is your net worth. You need to have a lot of connections when you're in times of career transition. When recruiters are looking for you, we have 3 degrees of separation. So as recruiters, we want a really big network because we can search 3 degrees out from there. And to be searchable, you want to have a really healthy network. I'm not saying yes to every single connection that comes my way. I look at every single profile, and if someone doesn't look legit, or they look like they're just going to sell me a marketing funnel with no warm up, I don't accept those. I'm not sure if I answered that for you though.
So I know we're getting to the end of our time. And Gina, you're going to share. Oh, sorry. There's one more final tip.
Yeah. Okay. I was just going to roll it right in there. So one of the LinkedIn best practices that I talk about is, I would say 98% of the time, I always personalize my connection request, even if I know the individual. So the only time I wouldn't is if I was sitting literally next to Sue at a luncheon and oh, Sue, let's connect on LinkedIn. I'm not going to type out a note, Sue, let's connect in. Even if I know people, I'll say, gosh, I can't even believe we're not connected on LinkedIn. Can you, let's get that taken care of. Something that shows that you went the extra mile, and it's not just the plain, standard thing. And always do it when you don't know the individual, because the individual doesn't know why you're connecting. So, let them know. I read something. I saw a comment you made on a post. I think you're really smart, something. So that's my top tip today on LinkedIn. And then we'll open it up for questions. These are ways that you can find me and find Talents Group. And if you would like a copy of this presentation, please feel free to send me an email at gina@talentsgroup.com, and I'd be happy to forward this presentation to you as well.
We definitely have a few more questions. Earlier, Caitlin wanted to know, has anyone ever gotten a new job from LinkedIn?
Anyone? Sure. We spend a lot of time, Talents Group does, doing our executive search. It's one of the many ways that we reach out into our network. Absolutely. Jobs are posted there. There's hashtags you can follow. There's new hashtags that have developed since the COVID virus has hit. There's, people specifically using that hashtag to post jobs to help job seekers right now. So it's very easy to Google, top hashtags on LinkedIn. I follow Andy Foote, who's a LinkedIn guru, he writes an article once a year at least on the top 100 hashtags on LinkedIn. There's ways that you can go and find opportunities, and you also need to have a really solid LinkedIn profile to be found.
My son has been recruited via LinkedIn and ended up with a job because of it. I'm waiting.
So yes.
I'm waiting.
And Kirsten had a great question, I think, kind of, as it relates to bringing your whole self. So she said, my main lane is healthcare, but I also read and study a lot about achieving success as a working mom, single working mom. Is it okay to post about both on LinkedIn?
I love that question. It's so great because we've been having this conversation even on our own team. I believe in owning your whole personal professional brand. And yes, there's things that bleed outside the lines, but we've got one person on our team who is a super talented executive search consultant and also is a yoga instructor. And so the conversation that we've been having is, those are not the same. Yes, I think that she could be posting on both as long as you keep things professional and consistent. You don't want to pull something out of left field and start commenting on something that people will scratch their heads and wonder why that's off brand for you.
So Gina, I'm going to ask a dicey question here, right along those lines. It's a definite follow-up to that. Lean In did a game around bias, and it's a lot of Q&A kinds of questions. And one of them is, what will happen to a woman's resume, or will it likely be looked at if she puts, PTA as a club at the bottom? So it's it's kind of the same idea as this of, converging your lives. LinkedIn results were very negative, that resume would be looked at differently if that PTA stood out at the bottom as opposed to not putting it there.
Yeah, it is a fact that there is bias in resume across the board for age, for gender. That's a whole nother topic. There are things that you can do to help yourself when it comes to the resume development. And then also in the case that this person who just asked the question about, putting out things on being a single parent, you have to consider that. So you can be your authentic you and go ahead and pick those 2 lanes and comment and write about it and be really professional. Or if you think it's going to hurt you, then that's when you have to do some self-evaluation and decide, what you want to do with that.
I think your recommendation about making sure you present it in a really professional way is a great idea. How do you brand that equally to the other aspects of your life? So you're coming across as a, having broader talents as opposed to, and I have to go make cupcakes and take them up to the school and,
Sure. I think that you should lean heavily on the job that the profession that you're in. So in our case, like one of my teammates, most of the branding is going to be the executive search, but maybe in the banner of her behind her head, it's going to be some professional images of, someone recruiting, and then maybe something about, one encapsulation of a yoga instructor, or maybe it's the entire about summary, which is, this is what I believe in professionally, and this is how I do my work as an executive search. Oh, night yoga instructor. You could do it where it's really more 2/3, 1/3.
Yeah. I love the whole person approach because, obviously we're starting with recipes. We both have, kids in the background somewhere in our houses, and we are all whole people. And the nice thing about what's happening right now is not only are we broadcasting from home, but everyone's broadcasting from home. So you see, men's houses in the background. You see their dogs coming through. So we're hopefully moving into a time where whole life is very accepted for all genders.
Absolutely. And not just women are on the parent-teacher organizations. I finished my time on this year, and we had our president is one of my neighbors. So I can do that too.
Okay.
All right, everybody. I think there was a couple of questions that we didn't get to in the chat, so my apologies for that. I'm sure if you reach out to Gina on LinkedIn or via email, referencing this WCL Dine-In, she'll be very happy to do that. And Sue, anything you want to say to close?
Well, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. As you know, Tuesdays and Thursdays are our Dine-In days. You can go to womencenterforleadership.org and you can find the full lineup for Dine-In through May. And while you're there, if you're interested, of course, we're a 501c3. Everything we're doing right now is free of charge and really kind of taking into consideration tough times for everybody. But, if you can think about what that coffee cost you a month ago when you went to work, we would love that $4.50 that you paid for that cup of coffee. It will help keep us going in these times when we can't really have any live events. So we would appreciate anything, $2, $5, $2,500, whatever you like. And we really hope that you will join us again next Tuesday. Thank you, Gina. It was really wonderful having you.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone calling in and chatting with us.
And thanks everybody for the dialogue. I think that's WCL. It's connection and learning, and now we're doing it virtually. So stay safe out there, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.